Hey, how's it going? This is Chris. Gonna do some particle stuff today, so if you're into particles, cool. If you're not, you're watching the wrong video. 3ds Max, just the default version. I'm using 3ds Max 2016 because, I don't know, 3ds Max 2017's particle system, I don't know, there were some changes to it and I didn't like it as much. So I'm using 2016, I'll use 2018 eventually as well, but 2016 for the minute. Anyway, if you've never used particles before, it's very, very easy. Don't be fooled. A lot of people just come at 3ds Max and they like use it as a modelling tool for game dev or, you know, architectural stuff or whatever. But it's really, really good for doing particle stuff. So I'm going to take you through some very, very basic particle things just to kind of get you understanding how the system works. And then after that, we're going to do our project. Okay, cool. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just hit 6. And if I hit 6, that's just the hotkey to bring up the particle view just here. And at the minute, okay, you can see we've got 4 windows. So if I just click on anything, say placement paint here, you can see it'll give you a description in this window. And then this window here is, if I just drag it in and put it here, you'll see this is kind of like the Modifier Panel. It contains all the information on how to use it on adjustments and various variables you can put in and so on. This is your node map. This is where you're going to place everything and link it all together. Like I say, it's incredibly easy to use, so don't worry about it. What we can do is we can just start with maybe just a standard flow, pop that there, and if I come over to this side now, and you'll see that it's placed this icon just here. I'll press G just to get rid of my grid. It's placed this icon just here, and if I just do this, you can see the basic particle system is throwing some particles out and they're just going straight down. Now I'll do a quick talk through of what our single particle event is doing. So you'll notice from our standard flow we have your source, pf source, which is this. Okay, so this is what's going to be producing all your particles at the moment. And then underneath this we have the event, which is linked. So as you see, there's a dot there and a dot there. Now we can break the links if we want to by normally just either right clicking on this, or I think normally it would let me, but my mouse is obviously deciding it wants to do something different. There we go. So I've just broken the link there. So if I had different events, I could have this go to a different one if I wanted to. Now for the minute I'm just going to drag it down and make it go straight to event 1. Jesus, this tutorial's even boring me. Never mind, we shall persevere. Okay, particles, man, they get more interesting, I promise you. Okay, this is the birth script. Well, birth event here. Okay, so these are all your events. So the first one tells it what time you want the emission to start on your timeline, when you want it to stop, and how many you want. So you can have this in the negative numbers if you want, so you could have it at -30. You'll notice there's less particles now because there's only an amount of 200. Double that to 400 again, it looks pretty much the same as it did. The only difference is that now when we're at frame 0, we've already got some particles in there. And you can ramp this up to some seriously hilarious numbers if you want to. There we go, so there's a lot of particles. When you're just doing something like this, your computer's not going to need to buffer or do calculations much, because all it's doing is just shooting some particles in a straight line. But as we go on, it's going to get a bit more complicated. Anyway, here's your position icon by volume. All this is doing is it is telling it, or telling the particle system that it wants your particles to be locked onto here. Okay, this icon, and it's just going by volume. You could also have it by the pivot point, so it'll just come straight out the middle, or by surface, which is pretty much going to be the same thing, etc, etc, etc. Now I'm just going to keep it by volume. Speed is how fast it's going to be shot out of the emitter. So if I was to make the speed say 50, you'll notice that we just end up with this kind of massive block of particles just slowly coming out like that. Okay, so all down to the speed, but we can also have some variations. So let's say I set the speed to 50, but then I set the variation on this to 25. So you've got some going half as fast, some going half as slow, etc. If I press play, you see you get a much more interesting kind of effect there. Let's continue. Oh yeah, and we can do reverse as well. If we go over here, we can go to rotation. Now this is how they're going to spin. Now you won't see a lot of spinning going on at the minute, so we'll come back to this. This is the shape of the particle. At the minute we've just got it very basic, so we've got our cube in 3D. And you can see here, 3D cube, there's a picture of a cube, and there's its size. The display is what your computer sees. Now you may want to make things simpler, especially if you're using instance geometry, which we'll talk about later on. But for the minute, let's go to here and change this to geometry, and you'll be able to see all the lovely cubes there. So I'll drop back to here, and I'll make the size of the cubes 2, so that we can see them a little bit easier in this massive stack of cubes. And we can make some scale variation on this if you want to. So again, you could have some being twice as big, some doing, you know, half as small. Now remember the rotation? If you change that to random horizontal, you can see the difference it's making. We've got all sorts of different things. There's world space, so obviously they're just lined up on the XYZ axis as any normal axis would be. You've got speed space, so basically the Z axis or Z axis is following the speed that is coming out in the direction it's coming out, and speed space follow. So if we go back to random 3D for a moment, and I'm just going to press a button now on my monitor, otherwise it'll turn off, and you can see now that it's just basically generating a load of boxes, but all they're doing is just falling through each other. Nothing particularly exciting there, but it looks interesting. Anyway, you kind of get the idea. This is just the sheer basics of what your particle flow source is. And of course this is all renderable, so if you hit... I keep forgetting, of course, my hotkeys won't respond because I've got a recording tool on Pro, man. Let's just hit this and rendered frame window. There we go. Rendering, render. There we go. You can see it's rendered our particles. Now, if I go back and select our pflow one here, okay, you can see that we have some options in both of these. So for a start, we can have a percentage being visible of 10% there, or 100%, or whatever, okay? But over here, this is where we tend to do most of our work. So if I go to down here, you'll see we have our viewport view, which is 50%, so we're only seeing here 50% of what will be actually rendered. We can adjust that as much as we want, just so that you're getting kind of an idea of where things are, and then that's what it's going to look like when it hits the renderer. A lot of people just stick it at 50% and leave it there, but if it's becoming quite a heavy scene, drop it down to 25 or even 10. And then down here, this is a very important setting that a lot of people miss, which is our integration step. Now at the moment, if we look here for the viewport, don't bother with the render, every time I go forward one frame, it's going to calculate the position and everything else to do with each of these particles. Now if we're doing things involving collision, that's not going to be any good for us. We're going to need to drop that down a bit, because a frame with something moving quite fast could mean that the boundaries of the particle are going to move straight through the collision object you've already set. So sometimes you're going to have to set this to a half frame or even a quarter of a frame just to get the accuracy you need. And if you notice in the renderer, it's automatically set to half frame, so it is trying to help you. The thing is that you will notice, obviously, when it comes to render time, if the integration is much higher on the render than the viewport, that it's going to look very, very much different, especially if you've got a lot of particles doing collisions and interparticle stuff and things like that. Anyway, enough talk about that. I'm going to delete off these two again, like so, and rather than talk to you about what each of these lovely little things does down here, we're going to have some fun just making a particle system, as I described originally in the description. So, what I need you to do is reset your entire scene. Don't save because you don't need to, and we're going to start from here. Hey there, welcome to Old Man Blue's exciting particle workshop. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the object that's going to dissolve, and then we're going to take the object that's going to dissolve and use it to form a second object behind that one. Okay, so we need a couple of objects in order to make our dissolve happen. So let's start with this teapot, because they're always a good place to start. So there's our teapot there, and we'll make it nice and large and maybe give it 8 segments so it's quite smooth. But the only difference is I'm not going to give it a handle or a spout, so we have this kind of bowl shape here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this, so I'm just going to hold shift. I'm not interested particularly in distances at the minute, okay? You may be given a scene that has lots of distances and things in it, and that's fine. but I'm really not going for that. I just want to get this works by eye, so I'm going to put my handle and spout in on this one. Okay, so this is going to kind of dissolve. Okay, very easy. It's going to dissolve, and then the particles are going to reform and coalesce to become this teapot over here. Now, I need to change how many frames are in the scene, so I'm going to right click here, and for the minute I'm going to give it a count of round about, if we assume 100 frames is 30 seconds, is 3 seconds, sorry. We want round about 10 seconds, so no, 100, 300, let's give it 400 frames, just for the minute. Okay, and I'm going to stick a camera in my scene. So let's see, camera. Here we are. It's a nice free camera. Turn on an angle snap so that it's looking in the right direction. Hit camera. And I'm just going to move this until, not you, I'm going to move this until my camera is pretty much centered the way I want it to be for the start of the scene. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my camera come towards the second teapot once this one's dissolved. So, what I need to do is select my camera. So I'm just going to right click, just so that I'm not in the there we go, get that, and I'm going to click auto key, and I'm going to right click here and just create a key. Then I'm going to go all the way up to maybe frame 60, so we're about 2 seconds in. Do another one. You'll notice I bumped it to 59, but I'm not going to sit and cry about that at the moment. And then I'm going to start pulling this forward to round about frame 220, just to see how that looks. And just pull it to round about the same distance, so about there. Okay. And if I go to my camera view now, I'll just hit /. Oh, hang on. So, pause, start moving forward. Nice, and yep, it looks like frame 300 will be ideal. So I'll just go back to here, right click on play, take the 300 and click OK. Okay, so 300 frames in total. This is where we want everything that's going to happen. Right, I'll now come out to my perspective. We have our 2 reference objects, so let's name them accordingly. And the first object is going to be called particles emit object, and this one's going to be called particles collect object. Okay, easy enough stuff. And now what we're going to do is create a couple of things. We need to create a particle system, and we need to create basically a particle that we can use. Now, what we could do is we could create some geometry depending on how we want it to look. Now, a client I had recently wanted it to look like kind of Disney-like sparkles and twinkles. It's easy enough to do that, but for that we'll probably just use a facing particle. If we want to do something more complex, like have this ripped apart, then we could do something like using a kind of a skinning technique that we can do in particles, just to kind of rip it apart. But the problem with that is it's going to take a lot of resources. Or we could kind of cheat and we could just use very small bits of geometry, teeny little small ones, and have enough of them put there that it looks like our object's made of a solid, is solid because it's made from such a large collection of particles. So there's a lot of options there, but for this one I'm going for the effect that is similar to the one that the client had, which is we're going to have an object made of brightly coloured particles, and we're going to have the brightly coloured particles zoom out, well, not even zoom out, just drift out and then come back together again. Okay, so you've got these parts sorted out. Go get yourself a cup of tea and I will see you in the next bit. Hey there, it's me, Blue, how's it going? Okay, next up we have got our starter scene, obviously, that we created before. So let's throw in the particle system. So I'm going to hit 6, and I'm just going to reduce the size of my window. Now, a lot of artists, you know, like Pete Draper and the like, they tend to kind of hide off the windows. You don't need to you don't need to see everything, so you can get rid of things like the description and the parameters if you want to. like that, and then you've got slightly more space to work on. However, I prefer to have them visible wherever possible. One, so that you can see what they are. Two, so that when I forget, I can go, and then read the text off the description if this is a horrible cheaty thing to do. I know, but never mind. Now we're going to start with the standard flow, like that, and as you know, that will create us the particle system that you are now seeing there. Okay, now what I need to do with this is just change its parameters. So first of all, let's do some naming. So I'm going to right click here, rename, and this will be called our particle, let me see, particle emit and gather. Okay, it helps to rename them just so we know what they are. Now event 1 is going to be basically producing particles. Okay, so particles generate. So I'm going to rename this particles generate on emitter. Okay, now what I can do is ignore the birth value for the moment. It's this position icon. I don't want them positioned on an icon. What I want them positioned on is this object here. Now I'm going to convert this quickly to an editable poly, as I really should have done anyway. Same with this one. Okay, because at the moment they were just base primitives. And what I'm going to do is change position icon here to position object. So I'll just pop that there. Now I don't want both of them in my scene, so I'm going to get rid of the position icon by just hitting delete with it selected. And you'll notice that the particles are just, you know, dropping out of nowhere now. There's nothing exciting for them to do. Okay, well let's give them something to be on. So I'm going to take my position object and add this. Right, now if I get in nice and close, okay, you can't see the particles at the moment, but you can see them dropping out the bottom there, so that's a good start. And for the shape, I'm going to, rather than have a cube 3D, I'm going to have a shape facing. So I'll just put that in there. Okay, and I'm going to make it look at my camera object. Now you may remember we have a camera in our scene somewhere. There it is. So if I use the look at camera object and just click on my camera, okay, now all the particles that this generates that are facing objects will look at the camera. And I'm going to change my display from ticks to geometry, and let's just scrub that forward. There we go, and now you can see kind of what the camera's seeing there. So we have all these little squares, okay, and these are just flat single poly particles facing the camera. Now they're not very large, so what I can do is just change them in world space, so maybe they're a little bit larger, maybe about 3 for the minute, and that's mostly for my own reference. Okay, next, this speed along icon arrow. Well, we can have it literally from icon center out, or we could have it in random horizontal, where it just comes straight out from the teapot. But we don't really want any of those. We don't want the particles to go anywhere. So I'm just going to delete that. And as you can probably see now, we have particles, if I hit F4 so you can see them a bit better, just sitting on the surface of the teapot. Okay? But we do not have enough of them. So, if I was to start my emission at -1 and stop at 0, that means that when our scene starts at frame 0, everything, okay, all the particles are already there. So let's bump it up a bit and put 50,000 particles in. A nice big number, but we want a decent looking effect. And 50,000 isn't really that much. And now if I just scrub through my scene, you'll notice it's kind of trying to do a lot of processing on this already. Actually, I'll drop it down to 25,000 for a minute. Okay, so make it a little bit easier, half as many calculations. Okay, but nothing's happening. It's just displaying it. The rotation, which we don't even need, so I may as well get rid of that. Just the particles, just doing that. Okay, nothing at all else. Okay, now that we've got the particles placed on this, okay, we're going to move to the next part where we're going to cause the particles to drift slowly away from the first emitter. Okay? Hey, how's it going? Okay, so got the stuff on our emitter here. I'm going to take this nice and slowly. Okay, now what I need to do next is make the particles come off this. Now I don't want to do it just by using a speed, because if I've got a speed it's not going to look very good. I've done this a few times, trust me on this. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go over here to my forces, and I'm going to use a couple of these. So I'm going to use some wind, just drag that out like so, and I want a couple of these. So I'm going to take this one and then duplicate it over to here like that. Okay, I don't really need to rename these, so I'm not going to, but I'm going to rotate them about 10 degrees in on both of these like that. And if I go to the Modifier Panel and just have a quick look at them, I'll be able to adjust them as we go along. And have a little bit of turbulence and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I am going to tell this that after round about between half a second and 1.5 seconds, I want the particles here to start breezing off the teapot. Okay, and I'm also going to hide the teapot. So if I just select my teapot here, there it is, right click and hide selection. You'll notice the particles are still here, but now I'm going to be able to make sure that when they drift away they're still looking okay. And what I'm going to use for this is an age test, which I'm just going to put in the bottom here. Now at the minute the age test, based on the particle age, so just since it was born, which is at -1, if the test value is 31 because it was generated at -1, give or take 15, then that is going to be between half a second and 1.5 seconds. Okay, and when that happens I want a force, and the force is going to be these two winds. So force allows me to use external things like winds, drags, stuff like that. So I'll drop a force in, drag that to there, and then for my force I will add this and this. That's wind 1 and wind 2. And now we'll watch, and they'll be quite fast because the wind tends to be pretty swift in this respect. But it'll give us a good idea of how to set these up now. And what I want to do is just move that one maybe about another 25 degrees, same with this one. Oop, one back. Because all the particles will slowly come off this. Now I'm going to change this again to display geometry. Okay, and I'm going to start changing the forces of these. So 0.15, 0.2, let's try this one as well. Okay, so really getting some slow. So you can see there's some movement here, but it's not happening much, so now we can increase the strength on it a bit. Trying to reduce, there we go, a little bit less. Just messing with the values, just seeing what we can come up with. There we go, 0.025 will do it. And for this one, 0.3, not 0.35, and 0.05 there. So we're getting that kind of effect there as they kind of blow together. Okay, so that's a good start because they're lifting off the shape. Okay, and we're getting that interesting shape there. It's going to be a bit fast, so I can also change this down here if I need to. Go to my force and change its influence down, and I can make it a much slower effect if I want, just basically making it look like the particles are slowly being released. Now that's a little bit slow for me. Remember, I do this as a kind of a visual thing. Let's try 250% influence and see how that looks. Ah, that's better. Maybe just a teeny bit faster. Not too much, because by the time we get to there and things have started moving, which is at frame 80, I want these to start drifting apart a little bit. Okay, so when it gets to here, frame 80, we're going to go to the next event. So I'm going to put in another time warp, not time warp, age test, and I am going to change the name of event 1 now to particles move, or start to move. Like so. And then with this age test, what I'm going to do is I am going to get a random walk and jag it here. And this random walk is one of the new nodes that came in. I think it was from pack 3 of the last particle flow ones that's been added to this. And I'm going to change the age test for the particles age to 81, give or take 20 frames on each side. Okay, actually maybe less, so they can start wandering pretty much straight away. Let's change that to 35 on each side. Okay, and we'll hook these together, and I'm just using the default random walk settings at the minute, and you can see already it's starting. So I'll change this to geometry, and I'm going to change the size on our shape facing, because I do think it's probably a bit large, and I want to be able to see what it's doing there. Okay, so now if I come back, we pull it out and they start to move, and now they're starting to come out, break apart, like so. Now there's some settings we can use inside of our random walk, so what I'm going to do is just grab that, and we can change things like speed and variation and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the particle velocity speed down to 80, slow them down just a little bit, and then I'm going to add some variation to that of maybe 20%, so some are going a little bit faster, some are going a little bit slower. For the motion viscosity, I want 80% viscosity, and again I want some variation in that, so I'm going to add maybe some 40% to the actual variation. Okay, so let's go and have a look at this effect again. I'm just going to reduce the size of my particle flow and drop it to camera, because this will give me a good idea of kind of how it's looking. I think the camera's probably moving a little bit too fast, so I'm just going to select my camera, and in a second, select, and I'm going to move these two a little bit along, maybe to about there. Okay, and that way we get to see more of what's going on here. So it's going to break up like so. Don't want them going too far, so we're working out roughly where we need to start doing it for the coalesce now. Okay, so I can see that round about frame, say 140 is where I'm interested in, and so from frame 140 I'm going to start pulling the particles back together again, so that we can start making them obviously become part of the object they're supposed to gather to. So get yourself a cup of coffee, or a cigarette, or a big cigar, or some cognac, and I'll see you in the next bit. Okay, so with the particles all emitting, we're going to make them start to coalesce. Frame 140, remember. Now, we need to put some names in this again, so I'm going to rename this one. And this one's called, well, we'll just call it Random Walk, because that's the only operator we use this time. Okay, Random Walk. But Random Walk, I should probably also change to, and move to follow. Move to follow. Okay, now none of these objects are animated, by the way. I'll try and get some time to talk about animated materials soon, but for the moment just going to do it this way. So let's see, I'm in perspective view again over here. I just need to press P. You can see all our lovely particles starting to do what they're supposed to, i.e. spread out there. And we've only got 25,000, but it's already looking okay. We're going to do some things to the particles to make them more interesting soon as well, but in the meantime we're going to do another age test. Okay, now this first age test is going to be Actually no, not an age test, sorry, this is going to be a split before we do the age test. I should have thought about that really. So I'll just delete this event, and if I just come down here, okay, what we can do is I can split an amount, okay, of particles by a percentage and send them to the next event. So if I go here and use a split amount, I can send, say, 50% of these particles to the next event via an age test. Okay, so pull this down here. Come on, you, down. Fine, I'll delete you and just rebuild you otherwise. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this age test here. I'm going to ask the system to check if the particles are 140. Okay, no real give or take at this point, just 140. When they are, they're going to get passed this test here. This test here is going to split some of them. So, split amount, like so. Okay, so age test to see if they're 140. We'll use this 5 variation anyway, because it'll add some minor randomness to it, but not a lot. Okay, so if they're 150, sorry, 135 to 145, sorry, it goes here. So you'll see, obviously, some of them have just changed and became dots. Now the split amount, I don't want it to be 50%. I think that's a little bit too high. So I'm going to change that to 33%. Okay, so we don't need too many. And that 33% of the particles here, that's going to go over to a secondary event, which is going to be find target. Like so. Okay, and so I'm going to wire this and this together. And our find target is going to be a mesh object, and it's going to be this one, as you can probably tell. Okay, and it's not an animated shape. If it was, I'd click that, and it's not moving, so I don't need to click that either. But we should see now that some of the particles are zooming towards it, okay, to basically become one with this. The rest of them have turned into these meshes anyway, sorry, I mean these points anyway, but that one, as you can see, it's starting to go down and find it. Now the thing is, I don't want it getting there too quickly, so we've got a speed of 200 at the minute and an acceleration limit of 1000. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change that, and I'm going to bring that down to 600. I'm going to change the speed to 200, or maybe even 150, and I'm going to give a variation of 100. So some are going to be much, much slower, some are going to be much, much faster. Okay, and now if I go to frame 140, where the action's starting to happen, and you'll see that they're starting to move down towards the teapot. Okay, now when they get there and find their target, well, that's a second event, and that is stop. I don't want them to do anything else. I don't want them to move anywhere. I don't want them to go anywhere. Stop. Now, if I scroll past this, you can see some are going past the teapot and zooming off into outer space. Again, this has got to do with, in part, the steps that we're using and the way that we're calculating stuff. However, I'll just change this to geometry. We can change that soon. We just want to get the particles going in the right direction for the time being. There we go, so it's just recalculated it. I should be able to move around the object and we can go down and see the teapot. Okay, so all these particles now are going to the teapot and adhering to it, and you can see as they're slowly gathering there. Okay, next we need to reproduce this event. Okay, now we could do it in a script, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is, if I do it this way, I like the fact that I have a lot more control over my object. So at the moment the split amount was 33%. What happens to the ones that aren't split, the remaining 67%? Well, for those ones we'll do another age test. Stick it in the end there. And with this age test, what we're going to do, and I think I'm going to reduce our particles just for the moment to make it a little bit easier. Maybe make 5,000 instead, which is a lot less. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, because the last one was what, 170? Sorry, 140, so I'll make this one 170 for this age test. So, test value, 170, but this time I'm putting a 30 value on it. So, we're going to get random particles that were, okay, coming off this one, linking up with the particles coming off this one to a degree. And I'm going to take the events and give them some names. So right click, click, rename, and I'm going to call this one, let me see, particles divide and code, just so I know what they are. And this is rename. This is going to be find teapot 001, and this is going to be stop. Okay, so find teapot, stop. Bring that down a bit there. So age test 170 plus 3. So let's duplicate this entire event. So I can copy it and just paste it. I don't want an instanced one, so I'm going to put this here, straight underneath, and let me see, I'm going to need to split my amount again. So if I get my split amount, now this time, okay, I'm going to split the remaining amount by 50%, because we've had 33%, so 50% of the remaining 67% should give us roughly enough for 3 of these. So age test 170, you get the split amount, the 50% of them that are going to be split are going to come down to here, find teapot 02, and this is going to be renamed to split second batch, so I know what it is. There we go, so split second batch, find teapot 002. We've got the find target, it's got the same as last time, and what I can do is just put it on there, and now the second batch will come down and find the teapot. Okay, so again, you can see what they're doing here. They all come in, but there's still 33% of the particles left, and so what I'm going to do here is add another 110 onto our age test, like so, and this will be the last age test. So age test value is 210 with a variation of say 30. Okay. The previous one was 170 actually, so I'll make this 200, not 210. Okay, and that will obviously lead into, if I just paste, the third find teapot event, just here. So age test 005, go here, find target, stop. So at this point, all of the particles are now moving towards here. We don't have enough time in our scene, so what we can do is either speed up the particles, or if you've got a bit of leeway, maybe we can stick an extra, second onto it for the coalesce. Nearly enough. There we go, 360. Okay, so you can see the particles are more or less in the right place now, so that's good. Now I'm going to change our displays, because at the minute all the displays are ticks. So I'll just change those to geometry, or you can just get rid of the display thing altogether if you want for the time being. Geometry. Geometry, there we go, geometry, geometry, geometry. And let's see how this looks. Turn the camera. I thought I'd hidden this shape. Oh yes, I have, I'm right at the back here. Okay, so I'll just hide my particles collect object. Okay, so now we've got 2, and if I do a quick play, breaks apart, splits, starts to move, and reforms. A broken teapot. Perfect. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just adjust the timing on the last fine teapot. So if we look here, the age test was 200 plus 30. I'm going to make it 100. Well, no, I'm going to make it probably 190 plus 15, so much less of a window. And just play it. See how that looks. Great. Okay, so you can see roughly that it's going to be a teapot, so we are getting there. The next thing we need to do then is adjust the particles somewhat. Now, obviously I don't want to put the particles up too high, simply because it's going to really impede the recording quite badly. So, let's go to perspective and drag it over there. There we go. What I'm going to do instead is change the amount that I'm using to, not too high, but something that'll look a bit better than this. So about 15,000 for the moment. And that'll give me enough to kind of work with and get an idea and a feel for how it looks when it's all together. Because sometimes you can have too many particles and it'll blow your scene out like crazy. Okay, so there we go. Moving, gathering, swarming, swirling, coalescing, forming a teapot. Perfect. Okay. Now, the size of these is something that's kind of bugging me. I would like to get the scale a bit different, so I think what I'm going to do is stick in a scale operator here. Okay, and this will just overwrite it once. I don't want them to grow like crazy or anything like that. I'll just stick it before the display. There we are. And I want to add some variation to it while constraining its proportions, so I'm going to add a 50% straight off there, so we have some larger and some smaller. And again, if I zoom in now, you'll see some are small, some are large, some are, you know, different sizes. We could even generate a small amount of extra large particles if we wanted. We're just trying to get that kind of variation into this. There we go. Overall, that's looking okay though. I would prefer more particles to kind of start off with, but such is life. Okay, I'm going to up the amount of particles in the scene now, just a little bit, so 25,000. I want to make sure that when I'm using the scene it's not pausing too much, because it will make me do a lot of what do you call it? A lot of caching otherwise. Okay, that's not bad, but another thing I want to do is I want to push the particles back a bit so that they don't need to travel quite as far when they coalesce. So, I'm going to go over here to my force. Okay, and sort of zoom out on my scene and get a wind modifier just here. Just bring it out. There we go, quite a large one just so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to bring that to about there. Okay, and the particles obviously start moving quite early, so I'm going to just clicking on the wrong bit there. There we go. Bring that to there. So just to this bit, because I want to move them back fairly uniformly. So I'll use my let me see, force, and I'm going to add. Now this will shoot them way back first. They'll be gone. See that? Like completely, and then they'll have to do the thing from way back there, so that's no good to us. So I'm going to change my strength on this to about 0.2, nothing too heavy, maybe less. I don't want it going too far back, I want them going back a bit, but not so far that it kind of destroys the effect. And I want to just change the decay on this to about 0.07. A little bit of decay, so it's kind of going back but not too far. Actually, I'll change that to about 0.01 and add a little bit of turbulence to it as well. A little bit of frequency, just to kind of blow them apart. Okay, so this way the particles are getting headed back a little bit. Let's have a look. Yeah, if you go back, I think actually I just will turn the decay off. Let's have a look. Or increase the strength. There we go. Ah, that's better. That's what I need. So now if we look at it, and let's have a look and make sure they've coalesced properly, and they have. That's excellent. Okay, now let's have a look at the find targets in the next one and do some tweaking to our scene. Hi there. Okay, so it's time to do a little bit of modification and adjustment to our set. So what I've got here is I have my first find target. Remember, I've got everything nice and easy to find here. So my find target by speed. Now I'm going to change my target point to less than 5 because it was at 1, and I'm going to change my docking direction to surface normals and just wait while this recalculates. There we go. And I'm going to do that again on this find target. Again, set the distance to 5, and got to let it just do its update, obviously, because it's doing a lot of calculating. And again by surface normals. There we go. And again, I think find target. Actually, I'll reduce this. I think 5 is probably a bit much. Probably bring down the target point to less than 2. And the same on the other one. So I just wanted to basically say the event is true. We stop when we're 2 or less away, and that way we've got less calculating, so I don't have to really kind of pump right up the half frame or quarter frame that I would need for calculating each step otherwise. Okay, so that's 2, and this one is again 2. And then come down here and let me see, point sync by docking directions, surface normals. There we go. Okay, just give it a second or two just to finish its thing. Right, now I'm going to go up here to my berth, and I've only got 25,000 particles here, which isn't very much, although like I say, I do have to rely on the fact that I'll go to perspective in a second. I do have to rely on the fact that I am recording, and therefore that is going to make things a teeny bit more difficult. Okay, however, we're getting the shape of this from these 25,000 or whatever. The thing is, I do need to obviously change how many are in the viewport to get an accurate idea. So let's have a look and see. The viewport is at the moment 50. Let's make it 100. There we go. And it's going to update the particle system based on that now. There we go. But as you can see, it's much better covered than it was. Okay, there's still a lot of gaps, but it's still better covered. Considering these are floaty lights though, I don't really need to worry so much about what that's going to look like. And in fact, I could even drop it down and it'll look okay. So for the minute, I'll drop it down to about 15,000. There we go. It can recalculate. In fact, I might even drop it down to 1,500 just for the moment so we can test it. And it's just to get any last minute tweaks we need. So let's close this down. Have a look at our scene and just press /. There we go. Lovely. And then they all come back together again. And make it 2 far. Okay, so that works. I'm going to change the entire duration to 400 frames, and that way I can speed up or slow down the entire scene if I want to anyway in post-edit. But it's just so that all the particles seem to be settling kind of the way I want them to. Yep, that's nice. Okay then, so we're about ready to move on to the next part. Hi there. Okay, so let's make a material. I'm not going to do anything clever, I'm not going to do anything animated, just going to make a basic material here. So I'm going to go here to standard in my material editor, and I'm just going to get a ray trace like so. And then I'm going to probably rename this to particle placing material. And if I just double click on this, so I can see it a bit better, and then change this to a Lovely square. Now I'm not using the slate material editor, I'm just using the standard material editor. I do use the slate one, so not today. Okay, the first thing I want to do is change its transparency, because at the moment it's just black, which means it's not transparent at all. So if I go into this, and I can set a gradient or a gradient ramp. So I'll stick in a gradient ramp for the moment, and I'm going to drag the gradient ramp that I've created just here off to this material and instance it, and that way I can see somewhat better what's going on, and it'll go back to here afterwards as well. Now what I want to do is I want to change this one, if I just double click on it, to black, and then I'm going to click here and create another one, and click here and create another one. Okay, and this one is going to also be black. This one, it's black. There we go. And then I want a kind of a brighter middle, so I'm going to get rid of that one, so I can just delete it, like so, and double click on this and just make it a nice and white. And this one make that a nice white. Okay. Now you'll notice the actual kind of part here is going down the middle, right? So at the moment our actual invisible part of the model is 1. So what I could do instead is I could make it, let's have a look, radial, there we go. And now you can see that we have this part here with a visible center going on, which works for me. Now I'm going to go over here to our original map, just there, and I'm going to make a luminosity and just chuck any old thing into it, to be honest. There we go, like that, just to make it a bit bright. And if I hit 6 and just find myself a material, just go over here like this, there we go. Right, so what I can do now is I can apply this material to all of my particles. So, am I moving things I shouldn't be moving again, sorry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a material and just make it a static one. Just stick it underneath my render, just there, and I'm going to just click and drag that to there in instance. Okay, and now if I just reduce that and go to camera, and I just want to hit my render tool, so rendering, render, and as we can see they're still pretty square looking. Let's see if I can get a bit closer to these particles. There we go. Shift Q, yep, so we're going to need to adjust the actual, what do you call it, transparency on these. So if I go over this, like so, just bring it out, output, invert, much better, and let's have a look at this. Do some adjustments to this one here. I keep placing new keys in this and I don't want to. Silly 3ds Max. Okay, let's click on that. Bring that down to about there. Click OK. So now we can see that we have this kind of core here. Spread it a little bit like so. And I'd like to invert it, so turn that off again. There we go. And back up. And I want to reduce my specular level to 0 and my glossiness to 0, and by doing so I won't have any shine on the edges of my what do you call it, of my particles. And for luminosity, at the minute it's a color, what I could do is I could stick an output into that like so, and then I could perhaps just easily clamp that up to maybe 5 and make it a really bright little particle like so. And now let's have a quick look and see how that looks. There, now we're getting a shape that's much better. Okay, now I'm going to change the actual colour of our diffuse, so I'm just going to swap those over like that. Actually, I'll just copy them and sod it. There we go. Make them look a little bit prettier. Right, so we're going to set up our render. I accidentally stopped recording because I keep forgetting that the recording tool overrides the settings of the other one. So rendering, render setup. Now I'm just going to use my ray trace. So renderer. I mean, I could use default scanline even, and it will be very, very fast. It's entirely up to you, just whatever you feel good about. In fact, I'll just use the default scanline for the minute. Now I'm going to change my width and my height. As you know, 3ds Max doesn't have a lot of exciting stuff in its custom output sizes, but we can change this to HD TV, for example, and then make it that, and 1920 by 1080 is your standard 1080p. Now, we've got 400 frames. We're not going to output this as a single file. We're going to output this as lots of files. So I'm going to change the time output to the active time segment, 0 to 400. I am not producing any render elements at the moment, but if we're going to put this into something like After Effects and put glows on, then we're going to have to. But for the minute I'm not. I am going to render the output in files, and I want that to render to here, and I'm going to make a new folder for it called render output 01. Okay, and then in this I'm going to call it my render file particles, and then just leave a dash on the back, and I'm going to save as type, and I want something like a target image file, like so. Okay, I'm not going to give it a template or anything like that. I'm going to click save, and it's going to give me some options here like alpha split and pre-multiplied alpha. If I want alpha split, or if you want alpha split, then select it, and that'll create an alpha for this. I'm not going to. Just click OK. And then all I have to do now is hit the render button and go and get myself several cups of tea. So I will see you in however long this takes.
Hey, how you doing? This is Blue over at You Can Blue. Thanks for watching this. Hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you did, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. You'll find links obviously somewhere around here. And if you want to join our Patreon and help fund the development of more lessons and learning sets, we'd be really glad to have you on board. In the meantime, thanks very much for hanging out with us, and we hope to see you again real soon. Bye bye.